Alright, so we are going to cover validation of CSS files. We've got a pretty basic CSS file. It's not too complicated, so it should be fairly easy for you all to debug. And I'm just going to walk you through the steps. If you have validated HTML, it's a very similar process. Obviously, if you see things that could be corrected, you could start correcting them. For instance, I see these are capital letters. Usually our tags are not capitalized. So we'll correct that in just a minute. I'm curious to see if that's going to show up on validation. So let's see what happens. So to validate, we are going to go, I usually just do a quick search for CSS Validator. You just want to make sure that it is the one that's offered by W3C. So you'll see this URL right here. That's not as easy to remember as just typing in CSS Validator. So very similar to the HTML Validator. It looks almost the same, but you will notice right here it says CSS Validation. We've got by URL, so if you have a URL that you could type in, it would go right there. By file upload, it's just the same as the HTML Validator. You could upload a file. And then right here is direct input, which is the preferred method that I love to use, just because we can just quickly copy and paste. So we're just going to copy these over. We're going to see what happens. So we have 3 errors, and again, just because it says 3 errors doesn't necessarily mean that's all that is present. So I do want to just spot out a few errors that I do see, and then we'll walk through some of the other ones. So I do see that it's not letting me know that that is an error, but that is usually something that is not good practice. So you want to keep all of your code lowercase. Okay. And then we do also want to make sure that we go through, so we're going to see line 2, it says property font family doesn't exist. The closest match is, so it's even giving you a hint here. So it says font family, and then it gives us the rest. So we just are missing our hyphen there. And notice how that red goes away there. Okay, so we'll go to line 7 here. This looks very similar. Font size doesn't exist, so we're missing another hyphen. So we'll fix that one. And then we've got line 9. It says parse error, which if you've never heard of a parse error, you're probably wondering what the heck it is. So that does mean that we basically have a bracket that's missing. So usually it means that something's like incomplete in your CSS. Most commonly it's going to be because you have a bracket missing. So that should help you validate. I see another capital letter here. We want to fix that. And then from there, the other stuff, it's not necessarily whether or not the code is validated, but it is good practice to go in and format your code just a little bit and take away all these excess spaces. Your coding team that you work with may actually like to indent things sometimes. Sometimes they might like to put the brackets on the same line. You have other people that code that like to keep everything on the same line. So it's all going to be varied based off of the team that you're working with. So I'm just going to space these out so we can see you know, what we're looking at and just double check everything. Again, validation is just one tool. It doesn't mean that everything is correct. I do see another error that I'll fix here in just a second. So let's just go ahead and see what happens here. So it says no errors, congratulations, everything's great, but I do see something wrong here. So right here where it says font style italic, there should be a semicolon. So sometimes the validator is going to say, yay, everything's great and wonderful, but it may not be correct. Sometimes when you leave a bracket or a semicolon off, it's like leaving a period at the end of a sentence off. If that period's not present, people will just keep on talking. So you do want to go through and just basically decide how you're going to format this. Some of your teachers in web courses are going to encourage you to perhaps indent things and have brackets on a new line. When you're first starting out, when you have a bracket starting and then ending on different lines, it does help you spot errors a little bit more quickly. So I'm just going to format this way. As you go through and you start coding a little bit more often, and perhaps you get really great at coding, you may possibly want to keep all of your styles on the same line like we see on line 18. But for the sake of you making sure you don't make errors, it's going to be very important for you to stay consistent in how you're coding. So following this practice might help it so that it's easier for you to go through and make sure that you are able to spot errors. So notice this code looks a lot easier for us to look at with our eyes than what we were looking at in the beginning. So hopefully that helps you out. Again, like we mentioned before in a previous screencast, you do want to make sure that you are testing. For example, when you're testing, if your CSS doesn't appear, that's something you want to check out and make sure it's working. But you might test it and say, you know, I didn't want that background color. You could actually go in and you can come in here and just basically go in and change your background color to be something different. We could change it to beige real quick. And then we'll just test that one more time. And then it changes the color for you. So again, validation is just one tool to help you in your debugging process, to help you find out what's working or what's not working. And a lot of the times it will help you spot errors. So that is one of the steps that you're encouraged to take anytime you are coding a website. Whenever you run into a big problem, it might be wise for you to validate and see what's happening.